And when excuses at last dried up, the lawyer leaned forward and posed the question. She looked at Christine, her hands clenched tightly but her eyes steady, unflinching. I gave myself more reasons, Robin started, her voice laced with that of a woman who lived within her self-justifications. I told myself love is patient, that families flex, they don't snap, that a leader has to make tough decisions. Her breathing hitched, getting stuck in her throat. But the truth is, those decisions weren't hard for everyone. Some of us always felt the sharpest edge. Kody's attorney leapt up speculation, characterization, but the judge quieted him with a mere wave of his hand. The attorney for the wives flipped over a page. Mrs. Brown, he said softly, I'd like to refer you to a series of messages. The projector roared on, splashing across the courtroom wall, dates intact, names blurred but tone inconspicuous. They're not your words, he went on, but they have grown from your seed in them. Mr. Brown devotes his time and money to your family at the expense of putting off obligations to the others. Robin gazed at the words as if they'd been there all along, a wall constructed silently behind her back. I didn't see it at first, she breathed. But then I began catching on to the rhythm. How to word an issue so it wouldn't ignite a war. Occasionally, I smoothed over what the others wanted me to say. I rationalized I was maintaining peace. Her voice grew thin. Actually, I was maintaining the pretense. Kody pushed forward, mouth open, about to explode, but the judge's eyes kept him motionless, scolded by silence. Mrs. Brown, the attorney pushed. Did you feel compelled to defend Mr. Brown when others complained? Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment. When they opened, the tears were already perched on the brink. Yes, she whispered. Not pressure, like shouts of orders from across the room, but pressure like gravity, constant, unspoken. He didn't always have to ask. She turned to Kody next, finally locking gazes with him. I know you believed you were protecting us, but sometimes protection puts up a fence, and sometimes it constructs a cage. The room sighed together, the benches groaning under the letdown. Meri's face relaxed, almost unnoticed. Janelle's shoulders fell. Barely perceptibly, Christine blinked, not flinching. The attorney leaned forward. Tell the court about a time when you knew that the fence was a cage now. Robin swallowed hard, her hand touching her cheek. One evening, one of the children from another family wanted to come over. Just a normal thing, the sort of thing that keeps a family intact. But now rules existed, rules of health, of timing, of who had gained what rights. And I caught myself saying no. I said it with politeness, with all the reasons in the world, but I saw that child's face fall like a curtain descending, and I knew. Her voice cracked. I had learned to say no, in a voice that seemed like later, or soon, or we'll see. But it was still no, and it wasn't love. It was fear. She caressed her cheek, shivering. That night I wrote in my journal, when did I become the translator for silence? The courtroom fell silent, as if even the lights were turned down to pay reverence to the truth. Did you ever let Mr. Brown know you were finished translating? The lawyer asked gently. I tried, she replied, her eyes cast downward. In private, I tried. I explained to him we had to listen more, not treat each request like an obligation, and he'd nod, tell me he got it. But the calendar continued to tell a different story, papers shuffling as Kody's attorney interjected, his voice curt, biting. You profited from Mr. Brown's decisions, didn't you, Mrs. Brown? More time, more cash, more respect. Does it take so little to discover your conscience now that the pendulum has swung back in your direction? She didn't blink. Her eyes had already winced all they could. Convenient, she echoed, gently. No, heartbreaking. She swept her hand toward the other wives. I'm not ashamed of what I denied. I'm not ashamed of what I justified because it made life easier, arguments less. But I won't bear the shame by myself. I didn't construct the system by myself. The attorney pushed harder. Did you ever urge Mr. Brown to prioritize your family? Her jaw shook. I urged him to be there. I cried out for assistance when I was by myself. But if you're asking if I used his affection to shut the others up, she faltered, voice breaking. I tried not to, and when I did, I am sorry. She addressed the judge, her voice strong now, as if the stream of truth had found its natural course. I am sorry. The ensuing silence was so heavy, one could have choked on it. Even a cough would have sounded like a sin. The judge looked at her with hard scrutiny. Mrs. Brown, this court is not oblivious to courage. Courage does not absolve harm. However, do you comprehend that? She nodded, small and sure. I do. The attorney for the wives posed the final question. Do you think Mr. Brown can change? Not in performance, but in practice. Robin gazed at Kody, truly looked beyond defenses, anger charm honed over years for the man who had been a husband, a father. I do think anyone can change, she said. But change is a surrender, and I don't know if surrender is a language he understands. Her words dropped like snow, gentle, lovely, and cold enough to change all they touched. Kody's face set to stone, chiseled. His pride blazed hot against the cold in the room, his eyes flashing with the unyielding flame of a man who would not yield. He leaned in close to his lawyer, whispering rage so contained it could never cross the courtroom. The lawyer raised a soothing hand, though it seemed less reassuring, more protective. From the gallery, you could sense it. The tale wasn't going to end in triumph or loss. It was something softer, more weighty, the gradual curve of the truth into the light. Meri's fingers released at last. Janelle put down the papers that she had held like shields, leaving them on the bench unafraid. Christine's breath was short and heavy, shaking the tangles of hair about her face. This was not absolution for Robin, but it was recognition. The attorney's rebuttal was succinct. Mrs. Brown, he queried, would you accept an agreement that prioritized the children? Time counted not in possession, but in presence. Years of disproportion corrected by something tangible. Yes, she replied with no hesitation. Yes, even in exchange for comfort, especially in exchange for comfort. When she resigned, the floor seemed to slope beneath her. Uneven dizziness after the letting go of words held too long, walked by Kody. She caught the smell of the cologne, the same she had helped him choose, the same that had been home. He didn't take her hand, and she didn't stumble. She sat solitary, the way truth always does when it first comes. Alone, bare, the gavel dropped. Court was adjourned. Whispers spread through the room, reporters rushing for the doors, their pens scraping like rain against glass. The wives did not converge on Robin, did not overwhelm her with forgiveness. Meri nodded, just a little barely visible, but genuine. Janelle's steady breathing spoke more than words. I heard you. Christine's look was on the door, as if she saw beyond it to a time when children would walk through again. The three of them together. At the defense table, Kody sat still, his fists clenched against the wood, knuckles white, jaw set. His lawyer leaned down quickly beside him, but Kody's eyes remained fixed forward, shoulders hunched, not in defeat. He had never been taught that vocabulary, but in a tension that passed its own sentence. On the wall behind him, the clock moved on, its ticking merciless, each second striking like judgment. Robin spotted a corner in the corridor, mercifully clear. No cameras, no microphones, only the chill walls constructed for fights such as these. She sat back, and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. What exactly had she shielded all these years? A family, or merely the veneer of one, flawless on camera but empty in reality? Her phone vibrated in her fingers, a message from a number she adored. She didn't read it. Not yet. Today wasn't for responses. Today was for opening something else. She remembered loyalty. How it had been brandished in their world like a crown. Loyalty to marriage, to religion, to the man who called himself leader. But loyalty without truth. She now comprehended it as betrayal. Betrayal of those you protect from the truth. Betrayal of self for declining to utter it. In that still corner, she knew, if there were a path forward, it would not be constructed on grand statements or broad declarations. It would be a road lined with little, unyielding facts, each day, every day. Unflinching, the bailiff summoned them back. Robin came back into the courtroom, eyes red, rimmed, but back straight. Kody's eyes found hers, anger, pain, perhaps both, and she no longer attempted to decipher it. The other wives settled in, inching slowly, deliberately, as women learning the gravitas of what they could put down. The judge continued. His voice was level, but the room was different, like a painting that hung straighter than it had before. The trial would go on, witnesses, evidence, objections. But the day itself was already noted. The day a woman who had been used as a shield stepped aside, allowing the arrows of truth to fly. Some hit her, some hit him, but all of them cleared the air before recess was over. The judge leaned forward, speaking slowly. This court acknowledges today's testimony as a turning point, a watershed in the record, and I want everyone to know, honesty is not a weapon. It is a beginning. The benches creaked as individuals stood, as ancient ships releasing air. Robin moved down the aisle, and Christine's hand caught at her arm, brief, gentle, not forgiveness, not yet, but a link. Meri handed her a tissue with a weary half-grin, years of history wrapped in empathy. Janelle's gaze remained level. Professional. The expression of a woman creating something to stand the test. Outside, the sun was dropping low, growing golden on the courthouse windows, catching the dust in a pale golden haze, as if to remember them that even what is still unresolved can shine when it is real. Robin walked into that dwindling light. The burden remained. The road ahead remained broken. She couldn't assure the court fixing, couldn't assure her children a smooth road, or her sisters an untroubled apology. But she could provide the one thing that had been in deficit, the longest, the one thing that turned loyalty into a guide, not a prison. Truth. And even as the courthouse fatigued, it never fell silent. The day had run itself long, hours and hours of testimony, objections, the sort of confessions that sucked all the energy out of everyone in the room and left them hollow. But when the judge came out of chambers, robes billowing, gavel at his side, the room changed. Everyone stood up straight. Everyone knew the time was now. The wives were in a row shoulder to shoulder. Not hand in hand, not in arms, but attracted by some invisible filament. Meri tense, lips pinched tight, as if she were repressing a lifetime of unspoken words. Janelle folders finally shut, drumming her fingers softly against her thigh. Christine jaw set but shaking at the corners, her eyes fixed on the bench. And Robin, white as a ghost, hands clasped so tightly they whitened. She had been the exception for years. Today she was among them without question. Kody sat alone. He had started this trial standing, neat, authoritative. But now his posture slumped, his hair lay flat, his suit creased, and his eyes flicked back and forth between wife and judge, never landing solidly. Authority no longer suited him. It stuck like a burden, oppressive and excoriating. His lawyer spoke in low, rapid tones, but Kody nodded only. The motion empty. The gavel fell once. The clap of thunder during a storm. The room came to an abrupt halt. The judge leaned forward, his voice even firm, each word slicing as a knife. This court has heard it all, the testimony, the promises broken, the children in the middle, the destruction of money and trust. We have balanced the evidence. We have gauged the truth, and now we must say it clearly. The room caught its breath. Even the air hung motionless. This family, the judge said, was constructed on the bedrock of mutual faith, trust, and commitment. That bedrock has been broken. Not just because marriages fell apart, marriages do break apart, but because obligation was cast aside. Mr. Brown, who was once committed, let pride, favoritism, and abandonment direct his hand. The result is a fracture that will never mend completely. Christine took a breath, her lips opening like it was the first time in years. Janelle's eyes scrunched up, prepared to catch every word. Meri bent her head, one tear branding the wood beneath. Robin held on to the edge of the table, as if grasping the only thing holding her together. The judge went on, shoving his glasses up. This court rules. Custody of the minor children will be with their mothers. Mr. Brown's visitation will be structured, supervised where required, and facilitated by counseling to rebuild shattered trust. Support payments will be recalculated fairly, with priority on education, health care, and well-being of the children. Assets will be shared with open disclosure, ending the chapter of imbalance. The words were crisp, clear, but they crashed like punches. Kody blinked fiercely, lips twisting as if words were building up refutations, justifications, but no voice could be heard. His attorney scribbled frantically on his behalf, but the wave had already turned back. The judge wasn't done. Mr. Brown, his tone sharpened, you have talked much of leadership, of being father, head of household, patriarch, but leadership is not domination. Leadership is service. Leadership is sacrifice. Leadership is consistency. What this court has seen is not the fruit of leadership, but the scars carved by its lack. Kody's head sank. For the first time, the man who always supplied silence with speeches was speechless. Going to the wives, the judge's voice softened, but was not without weight. To you, the mothers who brought this family along, this court acknowledges your resilience. You have endured too much, and at a great expense, this ruling cannot reclaim lost years, nor wipe away the pain. But it can say this: your voices are heard. The truth is heard. Silence, forced or voluntary, no longer will be the standard. The gallery turned. A sob was stifled. Reporters wrote harder, pencils storming to keep up. And finally, the last blow. This home will never be the same. It cannot, but it might still go on. No longer a family held together by one man, but individuals held together by the tentative hope of healing. And healing starts with response. This court has spoken. This case is over. The gavel struck. Once, twice. Final, the ring echoed against wood, against stone, against hearts. Meri's hand shot to her lips, her shoulders shaking. Janelle stood up straight, tears scalding her eyes but spine rigid. Christine allowed one sob to escape before she choked it back, tears streaming anyway. Robin wept openly, body folding forward, head bent in release. And Kody sat still, his gaze fixed on the bench, as if gazing long enough would warp the words to something gentler. His lips parted, anticipating Robin's familiar cue, the nod, the silent compact that had protected him before, but she never glanced up. Not this time. The bailiff ordered quiet as the crowd shifted, but the magic had already shattered. The wives stood up slowly, one collecting her belongings with the gravity of soldiers preparing to march after a war. No hugs, no cheers, only presence. Shoulder by shoulder they had held out. Shoulder by shoulder they moved on. Kody sat, his attorney whispering of appeals, tactics, future actions. The words passed over his head. Empty. All that echoed in his mind was the judge's verdict, played over and over. We have not seen leadership's fruit, only the wounds left by its absence. On the courthouse steps, the evening wind bit sharp. The reporters swarmed, microphones pushed forward, cameras flashing like lightning. But the wives strode past them in unspoken defiance. their silence more potent than any headline. Robin walked behind, wiping at her eyes, but she did not stop. Along the path they had all cut together. Kody hadn't walked in with them. Minutes later, he showed up, alone and accompanied only by his lawyer. No wives to his side, no family members around him, just cameras, flashing and swarming like vultures. He raised a hand to shield his face. For once, he had no words, no explanations about loyalty or betrayal. Just a man caught in the whirlwind of consequences he could no longer escape. The steps of the courthouse lay before him as the sun dipped low, shadows spilling over the stone. It was a sight that seared itself into memory. The wives going one way, Kody going the other. The divide was now no longer symbolic. It was etched into reality. This was no longer a legal fight. It was spiritual, emotional, generational, a decision written not just on paper, but carved into each heart that had lived under his decisions. The family was broken, but in those keen, fractured bits, there was the pale glint of something new, a tentative hope that perhaps from this breaking, something more could be made. Within the courtroom, quiet bore down hard, heavy as a living thing. Each moccasin shift, each creak of the wooden bench boomed like a drumbeat against the charged atmosphere. And then Kody Brown stood up. The courtroom knew it immediately. This was more than testimony. It was years of silence bursting open. She walked with the burden of 2.5 decades upon her shoulders. Rising to the stand, she readjusted the microphone, dropping her eyes for an instant in order to prevent Kody's glare. But when she brought her head up, her voice, trembling, weak at the beginning, was filled with the strength of truth. I dedicated 25 years of my life to a man who promised us love, equality, and faith, she declared, her voice more assured with every sentence. But what I got was silence when I cried, indifference when I pleaded, and dominance when I wanted liberty. The gallery shifted uneasily. Some had watched the family on television, but no reality show had prepared them for this. In the glare of the fluorescent lights, Christine depicted vacant birthdays, children looking for their father and finding only absence. She talked of a man who named himself a leader but wandered into a shadow, leaving her daughters weeping. She broke, her voice cracking, a single tear running down her cheek before it was wiped away hastily, herself refusing to appear weak. Once she was done, there was a silence that was almost reverent, like the entire room had waited to pay respect to her suffering. The judge nodded once, his own quiet gesture of respect towards her inner strength. Then they all turned to Janelle. If Christine's words carried heartbreak, Janelle's burned with fire. She rose with the steel of someone who had lived too long in anger. Her jaw tight, her fists buried in her pockets. She declared, "I'm not here to talk about broken vows of love. I'm here to talk about money, about responsibility." Her words stabbed hard, filling the space. When Kody acted patriarch on television, she continued. She was the one stretching paychecks, paying bills, feeding children. Meanwhile, he spent money on houses and enterprises that profited him. And Robin, she opened files, bank statements, invoices. Her proof was not sentiment, it was fact. Page after page showed transfers, unaccounted funds, extravagances purchased as bills were left to pile up. She thumped the stand, her voice trembling not with fear but anger. I pleaded with him, consider the school fees, the hospital bills, the children's basic needs, but he just said, "Trust me, I know what I am doing." She brandished the papers. This is what he was doing. He was cheating us, bankrupting us financially. Kody fidgeted in his seat, muttering indignantly to his attorney, his cheeks reddening, but Janelle's words cut through him like a knife. The wives weren't just complaining, they were untangling a secret, one reality television hadn't revealed in years. And then there was Meri, the first wife, the one most likely to remain silent, as she so many times before had. But when she stepped up onto the witness stand, her gaze nailed Kody's with an intensity no one anticipated. Her words were husky, weighted with decades of sorrow. "I hung around too long," she acknowledged. "I hung around when love was no more. When respect was no more. I said it was for the children, for the family, for our covenant. But the truth is, I hung around because I was afraid. Afraid that if I left, I'd be nothing." Her fingers were shaking against the stand, but her voice increased in power. "No more. I won't let fear keep me quiet today." The gallery took its collective breath. Even Christine and Janelle watched in shock. Meri spoke of the years of loneliness, of being left behind, invisible within her marriage. And then, with a burst of courage, she said the words that no one had ever heard from her mouth before. "He made me feel less than, but I am not less than. I have a right to be heard, and I won't let him shut me up again." There were gasps in the courtroom, a spasm of applause before the bailiff shut them up. Meri's face flushed, fear and relief mixing. But she didn't flinch. Across the room, Kody's expression contorted. His lips opened, but nothing escaped. The authority he had once exercised had eroded, peeled away beneath the brightness of the courtroom lights. The wives had testified one after another. Their tales weren't complaints. Complaints were petty, minor resentments. Their tales were an accounting, a symphony of testimony that combined, shattering decades of silence. For the first time, Kody wasn't dictating the story. They were, and regardless of the expense, they would be heard. When recess was finally called by the judge, the room breathed in disarray. Reporters dashing out, murmurs through the air. The wives gathered in a corner. They didn't hug, didn't congratulate, but they didn't have to. They were no longer broken, no longer scared. And Kody sat stiff, ashen, his hands clutched on the defense table as if it were the sole support for his stance. The patriarch was no longer the chronicler. His wives had claimed the pen. For the first time in decades, the man who had once ruled his family with authority sat alone, exposed. Without the power he'd worn like armor. Under the blaze of courtroom lights, Kody Brown wasn't the polished man America thought it knew. There were no cameras here to rescue him, no witty edits to salvage his reputation. What was revealed wasn't a producer's narrative, it was reality. Told not by him, but by the women that had once given him everything. The gavel came down like a gunshot in a cathedral. The chatter that had filled the room seconds before broke into silence. The judge leaned forward, his face set like stone, his voice firm as he called the court into order. But everyone's eyes weren't on him. They were on Kody. His previously golden locks fell loose and uneven. His fists closed so tightly, his knuckles were white. This was not the charming, self-assured man who had smiled his way through a decade of television. This was a man reduced to a defendant in a courtroom that had no use for mercy, no use for a do-over. Seated before him were the women who had shared his life, not side by side, not as a solid front, but tied together, nevertheless, in a common past of suffering. Christine kept her chin up, her hands shaking in her lap. Janelle rested forward, glasses positioned on the bridge of her nose, a pile of papers to one side, like weapons primed and ready to be drawn. Meri glared down, stiff, her anger catching only in furtive glimpses of the man standing on the other side of the room, and Robin, the legal wife, the chosen one. Her tears dripped freely as her body shook, torn between loyalty and the burden of truth. The judge's voice faded under the tension that thickened in the air. This was not just law. This was Judgment Day. The tale of a family once founded on vows of love and harmony now rested as a battlefield of betrayal and loss. Kody's attorney pulled on his tie, perspiration undermining his crisp beifana. Across the aisle, the attorneys of the wives shared stern nods. They were not battling merely for clients. They were testifying on behalf of survivors. Your Honor, the lead counsel started, voice calm, almost defensive. What we have here today is straightforward. It is not a case of too many wives. It is not miscommunication or confusion. This is a case of years of abandonment, of financial manipulation, of emotional abandonment. Kody's jaw clenched. His lips were in a hard line, but his lawyer's hand on his arm restrained him. The lawyer's words sliced deeper. We are going to demonstrate how Mr. Brown betrayed his wives, how he betrayed his children, how he betrayed the very principles he purported to hold dear. This family's downfall was not accident. It was choice, selfish, intentional choice, and the scars will stay forever. Meri's tears brimmed. Christine exhaled heavily, as though finally released from silence. Janelle's grip tightened on the folder before her, and Robin, half hidden, stifled a sob she didn't want anyone to hear. When the lawyer was seated, the air was thick with silence. Kody's lawyer stood, his tone smooth, measured, almost practiced. He portrayed Kody as being overwhelmed, trying to balance impossible situations, fathering 18 children under the harsh spotlight of celebrity. The wives, he implied, were resentful, their comments tainted by broken marriages and bitterness. But there was something lacking. His reasons hung in the air but did not touch. Even the judge did not seem convinced, his eyes fixed but skeptical. The gavel came down again. The time for testimony had arrived. Christine stood up from her chair, her feet heavy, as if reluctant to go. The courtroom waited in breathless silence as she walked towards the podium. For so long, Kody had controlled the story on TV at home, in church, but here, in this courtroom, he was not heard. Now, the women he had kept silent had the microphone and the truth. Christine held up her hand, promised to tell the truth, and although her voice trembled, her eyes did not. She did not glance at Kody. She looked out at the world, and in that instant, before she could utter a single word, it was evident. This trial wasn't about money or property or custody. It was about shattered lives, broken promises, a man once invincible, now unraveling under the cold glare of justice. The quiet was thick with questions. What would she say? How far had the betrayal extended? And above all, would Kody Brown make it through what was to come? The gavel had come down. The accounts would be settled now. This was not a reckoning for just a family. This was betrayal meeting up with truth, silence yielding to voices long silenced, and when the dust had settled, one thing was sure: no one in the room would ever be the same again. He stood up, his voice already shaking with fury. "Enough lies for today," he growled, his eyes skipping over Christine, Janelle, and Meri. The judge nodded slowly, his face etched with irritation, not compassion. Kody moved forward, his eyes sweeping the jury, the courtroom, and lastly, his wives. His hand sliced through the air as if every movement could keep his falling. A part family intact. "I built this family," he bellowed, his desperation swelling his voice. "I gave up everything for them, for these women, for these children. Do you have any idea what it is like to be tugged in 4 different directions? To wake up every day knowing that no matter what you do, someone will feel neglected." His words reverberated off the courtroom walls, not with praise, but with skepticism. Heads shook, pens scratched out notes, eyes furrowed. Kody persisted. He would not yield. "I tried. I fought for this family. If I failed, it was because they wouldn't meet me halfway. They turned on me. They betrayed me, don't you see? I'm the one left behind. I'm the victim here." Meri flinched but held his gaze. Christine's mouth curled into a bitter line, her arms folded tight. Janelle sat upright, tapping her fingers like a soldier bracing for the charge. Robin's silent, pale hands, hidden in her lap, shifted uneasily. "Mr. Brown," the judge cut in, his voice sharp, "this is not the time for theatrics. You've been accused of serious neglect. financial, emotional, parental. Address the evidence. The words lay thick. Kody's chest labored as his lawyer growled in his ear, telling him to cease. He took a trembling breath and moderated his voice. Mine are good. Good kids, he urged. All of them. I wasn't perfect. No, but I was there. Perhaps not always as they desired. But I was attempting in impossible circumstances. 18 children, 4 marriages, the entire world observing. Naturally, I faltered. Yet don't inform me that I didn't care. That is incorrect. But the room remained chilly. The attorney for the wives stood, holding a printed email aloft like a sword. Mr. Brown, can you tell this message to Janelle? Your children are your responsibility, not mine. Is that something a father trying his best, or a man leaving you? Kody's face reddened. That was out of context, he snapped. I was upset. Haven't you ever said something you didn't mean? The lawyer didn't flinch. And what about the letter to Christine? The one where you told her you were finished trying, that she and her children were sucking your life away. Were those words empty too? Christine's eyes sparkled, but she maintained her composure. The jury wrote furiously. Kody's voice cracked. His hands wavered wildly. You don't see. They cut me off. They didn't respect me. They didn't treat me as the matriarch of this family. What was I to do? Just keep giving, and they just kept taking. The judge waved a hand. His voice sliced into Kody's tempest like steel. This is not a play, Mr. Brown. Those words fell harder than any accusation. This wasn't TV, no spin, no charisma, only truth. And Kody's own words stripped bare. The attorney for the wives leaned forward. If you were the dedicated father you say you are, why have so many of your children attested that they felt abandoned and unwanted? Are they liars too? Silence engulfed the room. Kody's mouth dropped open, but nothing emerged. His gaze jumped to the jury, to the judge, to the audience, and then to Robin. Tears streamed down her face, but for once, she didn't intervene. She didn't protect him. She didn't rescue him. Kody's words broke. I don't know what happened. I don't know how it all came apart, but everyone else did. By the time he collapsed into his chair, slumped, shoulders rolled forward, hands shaking, it was evident. The once unbreakable patriarch was lost. In his stead sat a desperate man, crumbling under the pressure of his own failure, and the trial was not yet half over. Then, Robin's name was called. The air changed. The room leaned in. She stood up slowly, laying her fingers against the wooden table for support, looking for somewhere to put her eyes but finding nothing. The bailiff eased her along. She lifted her hand, took the hemlock oath, and sat, palms sweating on the smooth wood, heart pounding in her fingertips. Mrs. Brown, the lawyer for the wives opened, voice firm, unbreakable. You've been the closest to Mr. Brown over the past few years. Today, we need you to provide this court with some insight into what actually transpired within that home. Robin's head turned. Kody's glare met hers with that familiar look, common expectation. The unspoken word, protect us. She had obeyed it many times before, but here, with the court's eyes on her, with the women who once were her sister's gazes meeting hers, another summons edged in, a heavier one, protect the truth. She took her steps cautiously, as if onto fragile ice. We tried, she whispered. All of us did, but trying became hiding, and hiding became lying by omission. She was shaking, but she went on. I thought my job was making peace, softening edges, carrying messages. But sometimes I was a shield, and sometimes I let myself be used. The room froze. The wives' eyes on her were not triumphant, but faintly hopeful. Perhaps, something could still be constructed over the debris. Mrs. Brown, the lawyer insisted, were you aware of the decisions, financial, parental, otherwise, which positioned Mr. Brown's family above the rest? Her throat constricted. Each word pricked like thorns. I knew some, she acknowledged, her voice trembling. Not all, but enough. A shudder of gasps ran through the gallery. Robin allowed it to roll over her like a dip in icy water. At first, I said to myself that it was temporary, a bad season, a misunderstanding, but we existed on excuses the way other people exist on food.